Hi everybody. My name is Irene. I'm a grateful recovering codependent, and it's really, really beautiful to be here on this Easter Saturday. Happy Easter to everyone. Thank you very much. Today's theme, as has been introduced, is Promise 4, which is I release myself from worry, guilt, and regret about my past and present. I am aware enough not to repeat it. Well, I really hope and pray every day that I can remove myself from worry, guilt, and I have the wisdom and the strength not to repeat it. And the only thing I can actually do in order to do that is to practice this program. This program has been an absolute gift in my life. And I never underestimate the power and the joy and the roller coaster ride that it is, because I don't say it in a sugar-coated way. It's hard work. But the thing was, I came from a culture, my family of origin, which is predisposed, I can say it like that, in a really respectful way, predisposed to codependency. I never had a name for it. I was brought up by a family with a religion which actively really encouraged codependency, because the guilt that I witnessed and I learned, and this isn't about blame, this isn't about shame, this is about reality that I grew up with, that everything appeared to be a sin, and I felt guilty about breathing. I literally really often, even as a child, felt guilty about breathing. I learned mechanisms of coping. There was quite a lot of violence in my family, and I learned coping skills of secretiveness and hiding and not showing emotion. Emotion wasn't really discussed. It wasn't really anything that I felt that I could really express. So I became very introverted as a child. I was brilliant around my friends. I was brilliant around animals. Animals were a real saving grace for me, in the sense that I felt completely safe around animals. I had a maternal grandmother I felt completely safe with. But most of my life was fear-ridden, if I'm honest. And although I could never articulate that at the time, I was frightened to go home. I would project what might happen. I'd learned that very early. And the end of the day was the way it was, and I didn't know any different. But the turning point for me was at 12 years of age. My big sister, my only sister, passed away very, very suddenly. And I was medicated for showing real emotion at that time. I was screaming. And then I was told to be a good girl by the church and by my family. So I immediately know that really, although codependency was already apparent, that was where I became the caretaker of the family, first of all, and assumed a responsibility at a very young age to numb. First of all, it was numbed by medication, but I also numbed out my emotions. I numbed out how I really felt, because I never felt safe enough, and I never really asked to anybody to help me, even though there were people. God, I've always believed in God, but it was quite a fearful God that I was brought up with. So even then I would be feeling guilty about speaking to God, because I didn't feel worthy enough. My self-esteem was always on the floor. But I learned to act. I think I should have gone to RADA, actually, which is a big acting academy in England, because I literally became what I thought, and I use the word thought because I always assumed what I thought people wanted me to be. I was very submissive at school. I was bullied at school as a consequence of being really frightened of my own shadow virtually. But as I say, I had the solace of my friends had horses, and I used to feel completely connected to nature and animals. But of course, the reality of life isn't animals. Although I'd have loved it to be, that child in me wanted to just live in that fantasy. I created fantasies in order to pretend probably that the reality wasn't actually happening. I had no compassion for myself and not very much for anybody else at that time, because at the end of the day, I was just scared, very, very scared. And I came into Coda via another fellowship because I self-harmed in various ways. And I'd gone to another fellowship 5 years earlier. So I came into Coda sort of 5 years ago, knowing that the fellowship would really, really help me, but there was something else that wasn't really happening. And that was my self-worth, my patterns that I now know my patterns were continually happening despite working the other programs to the best of my ability. There was something not balancing out. I trust my higher power. My relationship with my higher power is the most important relationship that I can have, because it enables me to have a relationship with myself. And the higher power of my understanding doesn't encourage guilt, doesn't encourage shame, doesn't encourage me to submit into submissiveness and attract people who are potentially harmful for me. At the end of the day, my life was a total pantomime, in the sense that I literally was not knowing who or when to turn, but I'd usually turn to the wrong people, and then abuse would happen, and it was a spiral. It was a spiral of events, and at the end of the day, I did not know, and I really didn't know what was going on with my life a lot of the time, except that I didn't see it. I didn't ever have hope before I come into Coda and my other fellowship. I always lived in a fantasy where I was hopeful, but I was acting a lot that time. I needed to feel it within. I needed to feel it within my skin. I needed to be able to feel comfortable around people. And I still struggle because I'm recovering, and I'll always be recovering. I've got nothing cracked, but I've done this to the best of my ability. God has put people into my past. This past 2 years has actually really enhanced my recovery, because I find the more I travel from my own living room around the world and see that, I mean, for me, people are all the same. We're a family. The world's a family until we're taught we're different. And I was taught lots of things that I didn't really need. I was obsessive about seeking approval. I attained lots academically, but I never felt any kind of, worthiness, even though I attained. I had good professions, very codependent in every profession, always wanted to fix, always wanted to mend. And I'd be in the middle of people's chaos that didn't actually have anything to do with me a lot of the time. But I was compelled. My doctor used to call me Joan of Arc, because I'd be in that many different things trying to fix this, and internationally as well with organizations. Absolutely insane, because I was trying to fix and trying to mend and doing really, but then I would crash. My pattern was I would crash emotionally, physically, mentally. I ended up cracking up so many times, and then just thought that this is my lot, because I never really I always felt guilty about being ill. There was always this, that you've got to be strong, and you've got to carry on. And there's the ethics of my ancestry is, you can't be seen to be weak, and sickness was regarded as a weakness. I could never handle that. I never understand it. So of course it was compounded by all this fear and guilt and self-oppression, as well as feeling oppressed. And at the end of the day, I've loved my journey in life, because I still love animals more than ever. I still love nature, and I immerse myself in that without feeling guilty. I've changed career. I have to practice this program on a daily, moment by moment basis. That's why I love the program the way it is. I'd always be projected into the future with fear. or going into the past with, again, fear. And, will that happen again, and all the uncertainty. But because my faith has increased, and I can only thank, first of all, God for guiding me, and I have to listen to that, but also because I don't have to have the pressure of my old religious indoctrination. I can let go of that with ease, whereas I would have felt guilty and also disloyal to my family, because you are not to say no, you are not to challenge, you are not to do anything like that, because again, I would have felt, that I was really letting everybody down. And that was the crazy thing. Even though I was a very strong, and I still am, strong woman, I never felt it inside, but I do these days. Not every day, because I have to practice. Before I get out of my bed, no matter what mood I'm in, so that I won't spiral into those guilts and spiral into those patterns, I actually say thank you no matter what I'm actually feeling. And the list could be lots of gratitude, bearing in mind that I've woken up and I've got all my faculties, and I've got a roof over my head, I've got gas, I've got water, I've got electric, all of the basic things. Then I'll send it out and I can look outside and I can see something beautiful all the time. I still struggle with anxiety immensely. I still struggle in social situations, but some of that acting as if is actually, it works. And then I can also have options of saying, no, I don't really want to do that, without guilt and shame and letting people down. Because at the end of the day, my whole behavior entitled people to actually then, if I blame myself, everybody else would blame me. And as I say, I don't have any malice. I've done the steps up to step 9, because I've took this program extremely slowly, in the sense of I do it deliberately. I do it thoroughly. I've got a wonderful sponsor. I've got people that I can reach out to. I use discernment. I never had discernments. I trusted everybody implicitly. And I love that part of me and that child. I do the inner child work. I've had therapy, and honest therapy, because I had therapy years ago, but I wasn't completely honest, because again, I was fear of being judged, fear of being reprimanded, fear of being bullied, all of those crazy things that were on my shoulders that used to weigh me down. I can actually lift off and say, wow, this is lighter now. My family, I've had to create some distance with certain members, the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my life. However, I discussed it with God first, because I knew that those patterns I'm going to continue, because I can't really deal with this. I pray for these people every single day, and I send love and peace to everyone. I send love and peace to people in my past and in my present that I may not see eye to eye with, because I don't have to tolerate abuse anymore. I don't have to tolerate my own feelings. I don't know what my feelings are sometimes, and that's okay as well. I literally can just take each moment, press the pause button and say, I can't do this. And it's all right to admit, without shame and without pride, that I can't do something, because whatever people think has got absolutely nothing to do with me. I will reproach myself with step 10 and step 11. I'll still do my inventory throughout the day. I'll do an inventory at night. But the more I practice this program, speak to others, share, is the more I get well. So anybody new around, my experience only is I just keep coming back. I've got issues and I still have to work through them. But for me, one thing at a time is enough. I used to think I've got to do it all, and I used to treat everything as though if I don't do it now, so I'd manifest the whole anxiety situation within my life and make it 10 times worse. I don't have to do that today. I have distractions. I do some art. As I say, I love the work I do right now. Again, I can get overwhelmed at the slightest thing, but I have to then practice what I'm doing, eat properly, drink plenty of water, my basic self-care. is actually watching what I eat, what I expose my valuable, precious eyes and ears to, because I used to be immersed in things that really wasn't my responsibility. I continued those patterns of being overly responsible for not just people's lives in this country, but all over the world. So I don't do media anymore. I keep myself fresh from that, because I don't need other people's opinions to mess up my already messed up head sometimes. So therefore, discernment there. If I'm in a situation where the conversation will come up, I don't have to engage with that conversation because it might be harmful to me. But I'll say it in a way that I really can't engage with this, but thank you. And I can remove myself from that. In the past, I will be full of fear. I'd be paralyzed with fear, literally, that I must remain in this because that good girl would appear rude if she took herself away from that. I have choices now that I practice this program, and I'm kind to myself. If kindness was regarded as conceited in my background, and again, there's no blame, there's no shame, because I have full compassion for my family and my ancestors, because it's just been a pattern of all the way through for as long as. So therefore, and that helps me alleviate the guilt and the shame about myself, because I did not have a real choice of being any other way. I realize this now. It was actually, it's a predisposition, because I wasn't shown much else. And the society I live in, I have to say, I used to think I have to fit in, and I try to fit in. And then there'd be this discomfort of, why am I trying to fit in when my gut, which I now listen to, is actually telling me you don't have to. But I wouldn't do that because I was seeking approval, and I wanted really just to belong. The only place I belong now is the places where I feel comfortable. I feel comfortable in a CODA meeting. I feel comfortable with certain people and certain places, but I have the hypervigilance I learned as a child. I feel energies, whether they're good, bad, or indifferent. And I then have to manage my own emotions around those energies. But I've got a choice to do that. I didn't know how to do that before. And the meditation, the prayer is paramount to my recovery. I have to keep those things every single day. Throughout my day, I can just take myself in nature. I have a meditation spiral that I go to that's been placed in my local park, another gift of sobriety. Gifts of sobriety are placed in my path all the time. A butterfly for me, the transformation of a butterfly is magical. I've watched that process and I've learned from that. I've learned about me while I'm watching it, thinking I have no control over most things. And I thought by being loving and kind, as I assumed it to be, was very, very caring. I've now realized that a lot of that was control and wanting things to happen in the way I want them to be, in an idealistic way or in a way that suited me. So I had to get out of my own way during my journey. And I still have to sometimes, and just say, whoa, rein yourself back in, Irene, you're on the wrong track there. And then apologize if I need to, or apologize to myself as well, because, you wasn't very kind to yourself in that situation. So how can you be kind to yourself now? And the indulgence comes back in, because if I was doing something kind to myself, I'll be honest, if I was kind to myself and said in my family of origin, right, I'm going to do something absolutely beautiful for me today, I'd have probably been sent to the hills. But again, the love and compassion I have for that kind of response is now, my goodness, that is something that I actually used to act out as well, because it was something that I'd learned. So I can't use any blame and shame, because those sort of spiral things, even though they never felt comfortable, I would do them when I was younger, because then people around me wouldn't actually question it. I don't do any of that bullshit anymore. I actually just be true to myself as I can be. And I'll just say, no, this is not right. In my workplace, I was always able to do it better. With people close to me, it's harder. but it's getting easier because once I've done it once with certain people, some people are never going to get it. And the acceptance comes in of this program that I have to accept whatever happens with other people. I have my responsibility, but only mine. I don't have to take everybody else's on my precious shoulders. I do regard my life as precious now. I never did before because it didn't feel precious. For every breath I take, and this isn't sugarcoating anything, I actually value everything that happens in my life, the good, bad, and indifferent, because it's all learning. Because in the middle of all that now, I have hope, even in the most dire situations, and I've had some in recovery. The hope has been there. It might have been just glimmery, like a little twinkle, but it's been there at the end of that tunnel. Whereas in the past, it would be completely dark. I didn't see any hope at one part of my life, and it was the horrific time. I never want to go back to those things. And by the grace of the God of my understanding, which again isn't religious, I see the value in every single religion because I live amongst people from all over the world, and it's an absolute joy because I see religion as a tree, or belief systems as a tree, and we're all just different branches. So I can actually see something beautiful within a religion, and then it fits well with me. But the guilts and the obligations, I could not deal with that, because at the end of the day, it suppresses it actually makes people it made me quite submissive. So I don't really need to do that anymore. But again, one moment's time, I'm still learning. I'm still learning to grow. I'm still learning to shine. And I have moments where it's just unbelievable, but it's usually watching a tree dancing. I can actually see them dancing. I can feel that. There's a bird in my garden. I put I've got a beautiful Labrador here that is used to do meetings now and just zones out. I groom him and I put the fur on the tree for the birds, and they're nesting right now. And the other day there was a little tiny blue tit, the tiny bird, picked some of that and took it to the chicks. And I would never have shared that, leave alone in a public arena like this or anywhere, because I used to be ridiculed for that type of feeling. Now that feeling is precious to me, and I have no shame about feeling that or sharing it. And whatever other people think about that doesn't have really anything to do with me. But at the end of the day, they're the things that make my heart alive, and they always did. But I lost myself in the midst of trying to think that I had to be better than I actually was. Today, right now, in this moment, on Easter Saturday in 2022, I'm on a journey that's never going to end, of unlearning and unleashing conditioning that I actually isn't good for me. So the guilts and the shame and the things that I can come within me now, I'm not saying they've gone completely. I have methods and I have a little code of practice where I can sit with them, and I have to feel them fully, not avoid them, not try to eat something or be around people that perhaps wouldn't be good for me. My gut will tell me what to do. It doesn't come instantly. It might come over a period of time, but I have to trust the process of my healing. And it is a healing journey, a precious healing journey, being in Coda. It's not an obligation anymore. Some of the time I'll be thinking, oh my God, have I really got to look at this now? I'd be in the middle of step 4 or any of the steps, to be honest, and I'd be feeling really, but that was the old thinking of, oh my God, I've got to get this done, using it like an essay, use it like an assignment. It's not an assignment, because it doesn't have to be submitted at any particular time. And I think that's the joy of the different type of looking at things, thinking about things in a different way. I can actually now look at something and just think, that's going to wind me up. And then I can say, well, because you're going to let it wind you up, do you have a choice? Whereas the key would always be in my back. I would be judgmental. I would be thinking that I have to control something. I'd be really annoyed. And some of those feelings still can come in, particularly in the current climate in this country. But I have to let go of it, because they're my triggers of spiraling down to despair. And then if I've lost despair, I've lost hope, I've lost my recovery, and then I have to climb myself back up. My life is too precious for that these days. I value it so much, and I value what I can share with others and people share with me. I can hear something in the street that I think I was meant to see that. The synchronicities that happen that, my goodness, I wouldn't have actually looked at in the past. Or if I'd looked upon them, I'd question it and see whether it was right. Now I can just accept it and just think, there you go, there's another one. I don't have to share it with everybody, because again, not everyone's open. And that's the biggest gift I have, because I was like, my mum used to call me, God rest her soul, an open book. I tell everybody everything, and no wonder then that I'd get all kinds of backlash for that. I still tentatively walk through that one, because I still love being open. I love that part of me, that part that just wants to, but there's different places I can do that. There's different areas I can do that. I do a lot of creative writing. My joy is just switching off and walking through a field and seeing horses, because they heal me. I have such a connection with horses, and for me, that's enough. That is enough medicine. I volunteer at a local stables, and that is where I have peace. That is where I don't have to worry about anything, and that I can't put into words, except that it's peace. So again, I've found these things, I've revisited them, because I denied myself most of my life the thing that I thought I enjoyed. All the things that I loved as a child, I can do now. And playful, because I always took myself far, far too seriously, trying to be, and I'd hold my whole body rigidly. Now I know to relax it. Now I know there's methods of relaxation that I needed. My body was like a board often, literally like this. I can relax and let go, because it's not all about Irene. It's about the world evolving the way it's meant to. And I don't have to be in the big driving seat. God's there. I'm merely a passenger, like everybody else in the world. I was self-obsessed at one time that everyone would be thinking this. If they are thinking whatever, I've got no responsibility to have anything to do with that. I've got no responsibility whatsoever to be in control of anybody or anything, except try my best on a daily basis, moment by moment basis, practice the program, journal, ask for help, something I could never ever do. So therefore, there was people put in my path over, and I can name them now. They were put in my path to help me, but I pushed people away because I didn't want them to see the real vulnerable person that I actually am. But my vulnerability in this day, right now, is my strength. I like being vulnerable. I like being sensitive. I love being the person that I am, because I wouldn't harm a fly. I love life to the full. But sometimes you shine too bright. But I'll never stop shining. I'll never stop being me, as long as I keep doing this program. And by the grace of the God of my understanding, guiding me the way, because I feel held. I feel held, I feel supported, I feel present. Not all the time, but that would be unrealistic. My expectations have to be at a minimum of everybody and everything. The only real thing I can rely on is the fact that God is with me 24 hours a day, and I can access that. I can't always rely on people, and I used to get really let down. Now the expectations are low, and I know who I can trust, but I always leave that space for life to happen, because life does happen. So even though people may may say they're going to do something in the workplace or wherever else. I'm easier. I'm easier about it because it's not life-threatening. Nothing is life-threatening at the end of the day. So therefore, I don't have to anymore think, well, if that doesn't happen, that won't happen, and then that spiral will happen. There's a big picture created over something small. I don't have to make a mountain out of a molehill. I can just say it's the way it's meant to be. I do step 3 prayer every morning. I do other prayers besides, in order to keep me on the level that I'd like to be without being perfection. It's progress, not perfection. I had perfectionism on things. Again, I know that's a trauma response to make it look like I was in control. So I was burning out in order to make it look. Most people are not interested. Most people are really, because they're concentrating on their own lives. But I didn't see it like that at that time. I saw it that people are ready. They'll just put me down if I don't do it correctly. I'll be honest if I don't know something now, if I make a mistake. Sorry, is that time? Yeah, I'd just be honest about what I'm doing when I'm doing it, and it's okay. I still have all that insecurity at times, but moment by moment it's lifted. It's lifting. It's like a little rays of twinkles that go up, and I can just say, right, okay, that's enough. I think I will finish now because I'm feeling that I don't think there's very much to say, except thank you. Thank you to all the Arizona team. You do a wonderful work, and thank you all for listening. And I wish everybody well, and God bless you. And for those that do, have a happy Easter, and may the blessings of Easter transcend all around our world. Thank you. Well, thank you for your question and your comments. For me, I had to be willing. I had to be willing and prayed, and I still do. I can still pray. I keep it as simple as that for me, because the feelings of shame have kept me sick most of my life. They kept me sick to the point where I didn't function as a human being. And I now realize, because that was all the shame that I carried. I carried shame for behaviors that I didn't like in myself. And to have the freedom of forgiveness for myself first, and then it's easier to forgive others. So it's for me, the willingness, the prayer, the complete despair that I had. I didn't want to live like that forever. And I thought that this is my lot and I'm going to feel like this forever. And it's only through consciously asking for help. But as I said, I've got nothing cracked. Feelings can come in, but I realize they're feelings, and I can look at it and I can share it with somebody I trust. And then I can actually look at it again, and I can write about it and make sense of it. And then I just have to surrender, literally surrender to the God of my understanding, because it's too heavy. It's too heavy. I'm only a mere mortal person here. It was too heavy for me to carry. There was layers upon layers, and they didn't all come off at once. They come off gradually, and it's letting go. And as I say, just for today, I feel free. Some days I don't feel that free, but it's only through sharing, getting it out of my head into here, the head-heart connection. My head is full of nonsense. Lots of things that I don't need, but my heart is full of love. So if I think with my heart instead of my head, which I work on every single day, I've got a chance, but I haven't got anything cracked. But I'll pray, and as I say, I live in a community here where we have every denomination, and it's magical because we all pray together. So that's that. I'll leave it there. I hope that's answered or helped. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. It was literally, again, I call them God incidents, God incidents, because I'd gone to meet a new member in my other program, and we'd gone and we were chatting, and then she actually said, "I'm going to Coda," and I had never heard of Coda. I'd never heard of Coda. So I said, "What's Coda?" And she explained, and it rang bells. It definitely rang bells. So I then asked, and being the person that I am, I needed to know more. So I came home and I read about it, and I thought, you know what, that sounds exactly like me. It was the missing link. It was definitely the missing link. So I believe in divine intervention. And I went along to Coda, and I learned and I learned, and I'm still learning. And that was that transition period. And I have to say, for me, it was quite difficult initially to marry the two together. I found one thing conflicting with the other. But again, I asked about that. I asked people who did dual fellowships, and I have to just reconcile myself with that now, that, you know, this is my journey, and I have to somehow make my way, tread my way through it. But I just believe it was definitely meant to be. I believe things and people are put in your path when you actually need them. So for me, Coda was, I realized from day one, that has been the root of my issues. The core of my problem was codependency, well before anything else, well before anything else. And this is only for me. So for me, that was that transition period of, yeah, I need this and I need this too. But it was hard to marry the two at once. So I'm really honest about that. I even asked, you know, I've asked online and Zoom, how do you do that? Because I'm finding a struggle. I was really struggling. It's got easier now because I accepted it. It's bound to be, because again, the old me wants everything to be, oh, I need to sort that out. But no, again, surrender it and ask for help with it. And I get that. And some days I can still have those conflicts, but not very much at all, because I can separate them as, I need this. I need what's available, because I didn't do anything in the past apart from what was destructive. So that's it. Much identification with everything you've just said, because at the end of the day, that was I was guilty about breathing, literally breathing, and I identify with what you've said about treating yourself to something. If it was for somebody else, I wouldn't think twice about it. It'd be done, it'd be got, it'd be given. When it was for me, because again, I've looked at this so many times, and it was often the unspoken looks if I like something, and you know, there was a lot of conflict in my family of one parent would actually sometimes buy me something to piss the other person off. So of course I'd be in the middle of that, and I would take their blame of that situation. So I've really had to be honest and look at all that. Again, the guilt can come in because it felt disloyal to actually look at my parents like that, as people rather than as parents who you don't disagree with and you don't disapprove of. But so the thing is, I see my parents as people. I love them dearly, but I don't have to like everything that I learned. I can discern of what I take on board. So, you know, again, it's unraveling some of this stuff, and by writing about it helps me. But letting it go and surrendering it to God, because, you know, the God of my understanding doesn't want me guilt-ridden about everything. You know, if I take myself, you know, now it gets less and less and less, because I'll say to myself, is that going to make me feel uncomfortable? If there's a shadow of a doubt that it's going to make me feel uncomfortable, I don't have to do it. I don't have to do it. And they're the little baby steps. It's just baby steps along the way. So I wish you well with that. Thank you very much for your question and your yeah, because I abandoned my needs all the way through my life. There's no two ways about it, because I didn't feel worthy of that. So for me, one day at a time, where I'll acknowledge some of those things that I abandoned, some of the things that, you know, I don't have to now remain in situations that are not good for me. Like, it's, I don't know whether this is making sense, but for me, knowing that I get so much joy from the things that I get joy from, I don't have to even explain that to anyone else anymore. I can just savor that moment. But I like to share them because I know that, God, you know, there's so much beauty out there. If I was to focus on the things that I would always be trying to fix and mend and everything else, there was no way I was going to ever do that. And the thing is, I don't have to control. Nature shows me that it's got the strength that also I can emulate. Because when it does everything in its own way, no matter what's happening in the world, the trees stand tall. The flowers come up at the same time every year and bloom. They know when to do things. The birds know when to nest. Now, that is so blatantly obvious. But the thing is, as a complex human being that's all over the place, which I was and still can be, that is the leveler that I can look at when I'm feeling I need to control. That doesn't control anything. It just happens, and it evolves as life happens. It evolves in a beautiful way. So therefore, I can think that if that can evolve in a beautiful way, well, what's stopping you? What was stopping me was thinking I had to control everything. So I just have to say, no, I'm just reining myself back. I'm just going to sit here for a few minutes, have a cup of tea, and just say, either sod it all, or isn't this wonderful to have this freedom just to sit and not think I've got to run around like a lunatic, making sure, and I haven't even left the house sometimes, but I'm still running around in my head. I have to use this by softening, by praying, by whatever. Walking does it for me as well. Walking, particularly through nature, even if I'm not feeling good, that will do, because the movement of walking calms the mind. And breathing in the right way. In this country, we're taught everything apart from how to breathe properly. So I've learned now to breathe from the diaphragm. It can be a simple thing like that. Learning how to breathe properly, that's self-care. Because if I don't know how to breathe properly, I'm going to be hyperventilating. But I was never thought that was going to, anyway, it's come when it's meant to. So, you know, letting go of all the things that I used to think about. There's a 5-second rule that I can just say, hang on a minute. Why are you thinking about that now? It's a thought that's come in. Can you think about something else? Talk to yourself like you would your best friend. I wish you well. Take good care. Thanks a million for your question. Thanks for your service.
Thank you. Yeah, okay, that's a funny story that you didn't know it was me, but I guess there's more than one Stan in the world. But well, it's a tough act to follow. Irene's there, but it's not an act. I guess it's just sharing my story. So yeah, so promise 4, I release myself from worry, guilt, and regret about my past and present. I'm aware enough not to repeat it. Gosh, I'll talk more about this at the end, but it's a great promise. I am acutely aware of the second sentence. I'm aware enough not to repeat it. That's going to be something I'll touch on as we go forward. But that is a major desire for me, is not to repeat it. So what am I afraid of repeating? I'll kind of start, I guess, at the beginning. You know, I was born to 2 parents that are incredibly smart people, professionals. My mom's an engineer. My dad was a navigator in the U.S. Air Force and an architect after that. So very like intellectual types, but you know, certainly had their own idiosyncrasies as people. And while there was nothing like supremely tragic or um, traumatic, if you will, happening, there was more subtlety that was going on, things that really made my life later on a little more difficult than one would have liked. Nothing malicious or intentional or any of that, but more just an inability to love and extend their affection towards me. You know, I did see, you know, interactions as a child between my parents where my mom was incredibly controlling. Having known her mother, my grandmother, I totally get where that came from. Master controller there, to the point where people were like, you know, somewhat fearful of my grandmother. And so it makes sense that it transferred to my mom. And both my parents were the oldest of their families. And my experience with eldest children, multiple kids, is the eldest is usually an overachiever, because they're generally seeking the approval of their parents. They want their parents to tell them that they've done well. And I think the challenge for me was that was the only way that I got affection, was through achievement. But you know, my mom's controlling. She's, you know, she's an engineer. She's, you know, if you say, "Hey, mom, we're gonna leave in 10 minutes," like she'll get up right then and go stand at the door. And I'm like, what are we doing here? You know, like that. I didn't say it. So she's very literal. She's very punctual. She wants to, you know, like, I don't know, demonstrate that, you know, whatever. I don't know what that is, but that's not for me to figure out. But that's, you know, one of the people that influenced me in my life. And the other is my dad, who I don't think I realized as a kid, but really had no ability to like express himself. I think that just, again, from his family of origin, that just wasn't something that was done, you know, with his Depression era of parents. And so it continues, right? So you have somebody that can express himself either through, you know, in positive ways, or can't properly express themselves when times are more difficult. You know, if you make a mistake, or if you're if there's a difficult situation, it's anger right away. So growing up in a, you know, a controlling mother, and, you know, a probably ineffectual communicator, and a short temper, and my father, you know, the safe space and all that was to, and those aren't like, you know, those aren't punishable offenses. Those aren't generally, you know, things that people say, "Oh, that person's horrible." But it is a softer portion of one's behavior that is impactful. And it impacted me, and it made me try and find the safe space in all that, which was, hey, when you achieve, you're doing just fine. Like, everybody, you get that validation, which is close to the love and affection you're looking for. It's not quite, but it's the closest thing you're going to get. So guess what, buddy? You better start achieving. You better start getting, you know, you do what you're asked, you follow the rules. Um, you don't really live in a fun household, but that's not necessary. It's just, hit your marks, do what you're supposed to do, get good grades. Um, my dad was a Boy Scout when he was a kid, so my brother and I went into it. So we go into Scouts, and it's like, get your Eagle Scout, and so I'm boom, 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 get my Eagle Scout. And I go to a military all boys Catholic high school in Washington, D.C. And, you just, you want to literally climb the ranks in that program. And, there's different, you play sports, I got a scholarship to go study abroad my junior year of high school, just all these things. And then I graduate high school and I go off to a federal service academy, and okay, more achievement. Good job. You're going, the government is paying for your schooling. This is really quite an honor. Just keep achieving, keep achieving, keep achieving. And I did well there. But all the while, I'm not really, like now I'm 20, or something like that in college age. And I haven't done anything to address these things I talked about. Like, affection is an enigma to me. I don't really understand how it works. I want it. I know I want it badly, but I don't really know much about it. Couple girlfriends in high school, but nothing serious. And then you go to college, and that was a good experience, but nothing really to speak of on my personal development at that point. More just growing into an adult and learning, but never addressing these things and not even thinking they're an issue, right? Like, I know I have a temper, but I don't really, it's not really put to the test in any serious way. No serious relationships, you just kind of, I just kind of went through college and but I knew, like, I want to get married. I want to have, the picture perfect life kind of thing, because again, that's more achievement. With that comes the validation, and that's the best love and affection that you're going to get. And so I, a couple of jobs, a couple of years into it, I'm in, I start a new job. I moved to Southern California, and somebody's like, hey, how old are you? Oh, I'm 26. Oh, you should, we know somebody that's 26, this girl that babysits our kids and is a preschool teacher. Oh, you should meet her. Okay. I meet her. We hit it off right away. Some of the patterns of codependency I can see in me. I'm sure we all can see some of them in us, but where I wouldn't call myself charismatic, but I hold up well in the light. Like I've got stories galore. Some of them are good, a lot of them are not. But I can chat with people. I'm not really too afraid of engaging with people if there's a proper setting to do that. I'm just not going to go up and talk to a random person. But if you're trying to go out on a date, I think I can do a pretty good job of putting my best foot forward. So 85 days after meeting her, I'm engaged. Like, I just only realized, I don't know, maybe a couple months ago, they made a TV show about that, like 90 Day Fiance. I had no idea. I never did the math until 22 years later, that's what I did. Like, I met this girl and, hey, I like you. She likes me back, boom, 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 love bomb, a lot of what appears to be affection, but not a lot of, like, maybe as much getting to know the person as one should do. And you know, we get married and things are, you know, I'm feeling pretty good, right? Like, here's a girl that really likes me. This is pretty cool. Oh, thank God I found somebody, because you know I need that love and affection in my life, and and it's pretty good, right? It's pretty good for the first couple years, but as my comfortability like set in, and maybe that, you know, desire to be on your best behavior wanes a little bit as you become more comfortable, I go back to, you know, the things that I know. You know, I'd seen, you know, my parents are 52 years of being married right now, and I would not call it a blissful, loving marriage. I hope they don't hear this, but you know, it's, you know, I think it's harkens back to a marriage of the old days where you're married for life, and whatever, you just deal with it, and you don't divorce. Because to have a controlling, needling mother and a father with bad temper, nothing physical, but just, you know, quick to temper, no kindness and patience, wouldn't necessarily assign those to my dad. So you see that going on for 20 years while you live at home. You go to college, you get engaged, you get married, you get comfortable. What do? If you haven't addressed who you are and where your deficiencies and your defects of character are, you go to that. You go to, I'm going to lose my temper when you tell me that I'm doing something wrong. Well, if you weren't doing this, I wouldn't be doing that thing wrong. Um, you stop being kind. You stop being considerate. You just assume that because you saw these other two people who raised you give each other less than their best and they stay together, well, then you just assume that that's what's going to happen for you. Like, she's not going to leave me. I'm a good provider. She tells me that she doesn't want, you know, quote unquote, somebody to be like her dad, who's a philandering bastard. Well, guess what? That's not an issue. I'm committed to you. That's awesome. But, you know, as with any poor behavior, that can wear over time, and it certainly did in our case. And you know, about year 10 in our marriage, as it was told to me much later, that things started to get just unbearable for her. And me, I was always like, hey, I got to keep achieving. I'm climbing the ladder at my business. We're moving across the country for new promotions, new opportunities. Hey, it's almost like I'm curing cancer over here, and I work in the transportation industry. I'm not doing any noble profession. I'm reading emails and putting my skills to use to make a good salary and provide for my family, but I'm not giving the love and affection that I should to this woman. And so things start to get, you know, kind of, you know, unbearable for her, where she starts to drift in her mind about why am I with this person? And then we moved to Arizona after all these other places, and we get here, and you know, we're at year 14. Starts getting bad, right? She's lonely again because we've moved and reset everything again, have to establish new friends, new networks of people, all this stuff. And she goes away in her head. Like, she goes off and makes a connection with another guy that's, you know, whatever. And it was all under the auspices. It happened to be, you know, my youngest child's third grade teacher, and the guy was super encouraging to her and encouraged her to go back and get her master's degree and become a teacher and all this good stuff, of which I too was doing, but I was also getting upset, raging, controlling, whatever. Nothing physical, but stuff you would have to walk on eggshells around me. It was horrible. Like, it was a bad personality trait. And I knew there was something wrong there, but I couldn't really figure out what it was. And as my sponsor says, I wasn't given the gift of desperation at this point, but I knew something was wrong, and I tried to do, I had an anger workbook. I knew I needed to do something different, but I didn't know what caused it. I couldn't stop it when it was happening. Like, if you did something wrong, I was going to tell you. Like, there was no patience. There was no, let me take a deep breath and think this over before I engage my mouth. No, it's just right to, how could you do that? Like, what were you thinking? That kind of stuff. Horrible behavior. And not something I'm proud of at all. But around 2017, around year 17 of my marriage, things had gotten just step one all over the place, completely unmanageable, a lot of very angry arguments, and at the core of it, I was afraid because I wasn't liking what my wife was doing, the connection she was making with somebody else. And instead of setting a boundary and understanding where I was and taking a pause and all this stuff, I just was like, just angry and tried to control more and more and more. Horrible stuff. And then somebody that I'm friends with said, hey, I'm going to this CODA meeting. Do you want to go? CODA, what? Codependent? I mean, like, I depend on other people all the time. And I don't think that's what it is. And they go to a meeting and I'm like, ooh, wow. Like, there's 40 things in here that I'm doing. Like, this is horrible. And I've been going to therapy and all this other stuff. But at this point now, I'm like, okay, CODA. All right, let's focus. I mean, it was the first time in my life where I was able to say, like, oh my gosh, this is what I'm doing. And I mean, like, I didn't understand it right away. It was all kind of confusing, but it was enough to say, how we always say, keep coming back. It works if you work it, and you're worth it. And so I just kept coming back because, like, that was there was something there. And I would listen to other people's stories, and you'd be like, oh my gosh, like, that's unbelievable that you had to experience that. And I'd be like, I don't think this is for me. But it was. And I just kept going. And I slowly, as my marriage completely unraveled, I was realizing more and more that, this was it. I was able to get back to family of origin. I was able to see that I was using tools that made sense when I was a kid, but I never had transitioned to an adult and figuring out what I needed to do. And so I was able to start working, on becoming a better person. And I think I got through step 4 or so and kind of let my foot off the gas a little bit. And yeah, my marriage just kept getting worse and worse. And finally, I think she'd asked for a divorce like 4 times. And finally, on the 4th time, it like took for both of us. And so we went our separate ways. And it was a good reset for me. It really was. I mean, my life was so stressful to the point where, as I'm watching the garage door going up, waiting to see the shadow of the wheels of her car, not even the car, but just the shadow of the wheels, was going to put me in a mood for what I was going to deal with when I went into the house. Stressful, just completely stressful. Granted, it's in my own head, but totally stressful. But slowly, with that now out of the way, I was granted the gift of desperation and was able to sit here and focus on what I did. And I swear I never thought I was controlling until like a month after we told the kids and this was happening. And then I realized, oh, something I just said, that was controlling. Oh my gosh, I could not see that at all. In the last 5 years of my marriage, I was like, I'm not controlling. I'm working to save my marriage. No, you're controlling. And I think that's one of the things that I've been most grateful for, is going through the steps and saying, these are defects of character. Please remove them from me, making my amends, checking in on myself, immediately understanding when I do something that's less than desirable, and assessing and having a conversation with someone, to like maybe make a mini amends. Like that's been something that's been hugely helpful for me. And, you know, really pausing, like being able to pause came out of this as well. I mean, it's not a thing in the program, but it's just something that came to me that, like when I'm feeling that way, I need to stop. And like, but it sounds so easy, but it's so difficult to do. And I just slowly started doing it at points where it didn't have anything to do with being upset. It would be like, I'm walking to the front door, I'm going to touch the doorknob and open the door and walk out the door. But instead of doing that, you stop at that door and you just look at it and you take that pause. And if you can do it in something that's not emotionally charged, like walking through a door, well, if you get good enough at doing that, you can transition to, I'm feeling really upset right now by what this person's saying. I can't do it all the time, but it's a practice. That's why I keep coming to meetings, because it's a practice. So, and in all of this, I've developed a really, really cool relationship with my higher power. Much like Irene said, nature is a huge piece of it for me. Like, right before this meeting, I was feeling a little nervous before I spoke, and I looked outside the window and I saw the breeze blowing. And that's always for me. That's how I know my higher power is with me, as I look and see just the leaves twinkling in the wind, or it's rained on me literally like Charlie Brown one time, where it's not raining anywhere else around, but I'm like so convening with my higher power that I feel this like washing, cleansing rain literally has come down upon me one time when I was walking. So all that's to say, this program has given me points and tips and tools to help, find a way to make a space. So where it comes back to this opening, which was, I release myself from worry, guilt, regret about my past and present. I'm aware enough not to repeat it. Well, I got to tell you, I was talking to my sponsor yesterday. I'm like, wow, that's a tough one. I release myself of worry, guilt, and regret. I'm like, I don't think I really do that. But, and I got to give full credit. He said, quote, it's a place of reference, not a place of residence. Like you just need to refer to that. It needs to be a guide for you. I'm not always going to be doing that right. I'm guilty. I worry about things, but I have some tools, through prayer, meditation, and daily reflections and things like that. I can make a space to say, now, I don't have to do this perfect, or I should let this go, this thing I'm obsessing about. Or, yeah, you know what? That feeling you had when your marriage was over, that you failed yourself, you failed your kids, you failed your parents. No, that's not right, man. That's not. You got to drop that guilt. That's just, your marriage came to its logical conclusion. That's it. And now you have the opportunity to live right here today. Don't lean too far in the past. Don't lean too far in the future. Know those things. Have them as a touchstone, but be right here, right now. And I'm super grateful for this opportunity to be here right now. I've never done this before, other than sharing at a couple meetings. If you want to get freaked out, try and talk to 61 people across the globe all at the same time, and follow Irene. So, hey, I'm super grateful for this time today. I don't want to go on too much more, because I don't have much more to say, but I'm really grateful for the opportunity to share a little bit of my story and struggles, and quite frankly, some incredible progress that I've made and I continue to make. And I understand acutely that that I suffer from worry, guilt, and regret about my past. I don't think so much about my present, but the last sentence, I am aware enough not to repeat it. I'm almost like overly aware and overly concerned, worried about not repeating it, so much so that I just want to be so careful. I'm reestablishing really good relationships with my kids. I'm, working on my own personal relationship with another woman that I feel is very special to me at this point, and I'm grateful for today and this opportunity to talk to you guys and the things that I have available to me just today. So I'm pretty sure that I'm positive that my work in Coda, my connection with my higher power, and trying to love myself is going to go out into the universe and reflect back to me. And I'm grateful for this time, and that's all I have. Thank you.